do in order to fast. But again, none of it is wrong as long as we realize that there is no New Testament command for us as Christians to fast. Now, it's definitely encouraged. The Israelites benefited from that fast, and we can as well, Brother Bobby.
And you're right. I agree with everything you said about it. It's a good thing to do. Can't find book, chapter, and verse where it says it's a command to do. But when you look back in the old Bible, in the Old Testament, you find that fasting had a purpose. And we can talk about various ones that fasted, various accounts, even up to Jesus, 40 days or 40 nights.
Right.
What was all about? Well, when you begin to fast and you're taking on a purification process, okay, you're beginning to go there and think about it, meditate upon the Word. Okay, so it's a type of purification process, with the middle of it being the preparation.
Right.
For what's to be on the other side. Okay, I'm trying to think of the terminology. It won't come to me, but the purification and the preparation for the change, for the lack of a better term right now, it's called something on the other side. So that's what you got.
Right.
It's a type of purification, preparation type mindset.
Right.
And that's how they used it really in the Old Testament. And that was part of Jesus. He was out there, he was undergoing some persecution, he was undergoing some preparation. After that 40 days and 40 nights, because, he was at his weakest point.
Right.
And that's when the devil hit. Early did stone to breathe.
Right.
Throw yourself off the pinnacle of the temple. His anger will catch you.
Right.
Well, look at the outcome on the other side. He defeated the devil because he said that man should not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. So there you are. He went through that process, and now we have on the other side. It was preparation for him to go to the cross.
Yep.
Purification.
Right. Yeah. So it is about preparation. It is about clearing our minds. It is about reset. It's resetting ourselves, purifying ourselves, bringing us, recentering ourselves back into focus with God. And that kind of is what the purpose was back then, and it can be today. So enough about what I say about fasting. Let's go to scriptures. Matthew chapter 9, verse 14 through 17. Matthew 9, 14 through 17. Then the disciples of John came to him saying, "Why do we and the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast?" And Jesus said to them, "Can the wedding guests mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them? The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast. No one puts a piece of unshrunken cloth on an old garment, for the patch tears away from the garment, and a worse tear is made. Neither is new wine put into old wineskins. If it is, the skins burst, and the wine is spilled, and the skins are destroyed. But new wine is put into fresh wineskins, so both are preserved." Now, the question, why do we fast, but y'all don't? Again, it kind of goes to what Brother Bobby is saying. Why do we need to fast when God is here? When the Lord Jesus is here, when the purpose of our fasting, we're right here with him anyway. Why do we need to fast? When he talks about the bridegroom, can the wedding guests mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them? The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast. I'm with them. There's no purpose for them to fast, Brother Bobby.
Pharisees, here's what they would do. I worked with a guy, he was an accountant, great guy, about several years. And once a month, he would fast. And the way he come in with it was, you knew he was fasting. I mean, he had this outward show about it, okay? So it kind of put a bad connotation on fasting. It's kind of like the Holy Spirit. The religious world has put kind of a negative connotation on Christians being filled with the Spirit, right?
Right.
Because of that outward show, right? Same way with this. More of the Pharisees was wondering about, well, why don't your disciples have this outward show? They weren't concerned about the purification internal.
And if they were following after the directions that Jesus gives in Matthew chapter 5 about fasting, is it 5 or 6? About fasting is that when you do it, no one is supposed to know that you're doing it.
That's it, that's what I was going to say, just like this guy I work with. I mean, he let it be known, I mean, it was, so, you have to,
Right.
you have to ask yourself the question, what is and is not,
Right.
right? How much is it show, and how much is actual purification?
Right.
So that, you have to be careful with those things.
He tells them, he gives them this picture of the bridegroom, and then the bridegroom being taken away, and then they will fast. But then he talks about these two different things. This piece of unshrunken cloth on an old garment, for the patch tears away from the garment and the worst tear is made. We're not going to put something that's going to shrink over this hole and then it's going to shrink up and it's just going to tear. Again, we're not going to do that. What are we going to do? We're going to shrink the cloth first and then put the cloth on the old garment. Preparation, just like you said earlier there. And then the new wine and the old wineskins. They've already expanded themselves out. But then you're going to fill up that capacity, and that new wine is going to ferment, and then it's going to expand, and that wineskin can't expand anymore. So we've got to have the new wine in a new wineskin and the old wine in the old wineskin. So the skins are destroyed and the wine is spilled. The new wine is put into fresh wineskins, and so both are preserved. Let's go back. It's not the one I wanted to hit. Mark chapter 2, verse 22, Mark 2, 18 through 22. We'll get it right here in just a second. Now John's disciples and the Pharisees were fasting. People came and said to him, "Why do John's disciples and the disciples of the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast?" So first, in the other account, it was the others saying, "Hey, we do this." Now here it's another person. Perspective is the only difference here is who's standing there watching, who's listening. It's perspective. And Jesus said to them, "Can the wedding guests fast while the bridegroom is with them? As long as they had the bridegroom with them, they cannot fast. The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and they will fast in that day. No one sews a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old garment. If he does, the patch tears away from it, the new from the old, and a worse tear is made. No one puts new wine into old wineskins. If he does, the wine will burst the skins, and the wine is destroyed, and so are the skins. But new wine is for fresh wineskins." And then let's go look at Luke chapter 5, 33 through 39. Luke 5, 33 through 39. I know that a lot of this reading, as we go through these accounts, are the exact same. Some of the exact same wording is being used, and sometimes it's even word for word. But we are building a picture of what the Gospels say on each one of these things, and into even repetition. We've heard it 3 times now. We kind of know what Jesus says about fasting while he is present. They said to him, "The disciples of John fast often and offer prayers, and so do the disciples of the Pharisees, but yours eat and drink." Jesus said to them, "Can you make wedding guests fast while the bridegroom is with them? The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast in those days." He also told them a parable. "No one tears a piece from a new garment and puts it on an old garment. If he does, he will tear the new, and the piece from the new will not match the old. No one puts new wine in old wineskins. If he does, the new wine will burst the skins and will be spilled, and the skins will be destroyed. But new wine must be put into fresh wineskins. And no one, after drinking old wine, desires new, for he says the old is good." All right. So what are we talking about here with this garment and the wineskin? This patch that we're putting over a tear in the garment. Why are your servants not fasting? Because I'm with them. Jesus is preparing them into something new. Jesus is teaching them. He's growing them. There's no time for fasting at this point. They're taking in what God is putting into them. He's making preparation. So they're essentially, as we're taught with the wineskins, they're going to become the new wineskin. He's taking away the old that it may become new. Any, Brother Bobby?
I heard a couple of lessons preached years ago, might have been here, I can't remember.
I know Brother Roy used to preach on it somewhat often.
Okay, and about the gospel. You know, the old wineskins being the old law, and you got the new law coming in, it's
Right.
gonna be so strong, and so the old can't stand it, it'll be shattered. And it did, just like the cloth, so, and that may be part, I don't know that it was him, but I do remember a series of lessons about that.
Right.
Coming to the gospel is what that's about,
Yeah.
preparing them for what's to come.
Right. Brother Jeremy?
I was gonna kind of parallel that, it's basically, why do I need to take this old doctrine, Judaism, that people were following, the fasting, the blood sacrifice, all these things, because something better is coming, and you don't want to integrate something old into something new, because, as he explains here, the wine is gonna burst out, or the cloth will now be torn or ripped worse than it was. So we need to focus on Jesus, his teachings, and not worry about what was in our past. And
Right.
that kind of crap.
Yeah. The practices of the old, the things of the old don't match up with the things of the new. We get into that with circumcision when it comes to the church later on in the book of Acts. As the Gentiles are starting to be converted, they're starting to join the church. Then we start trying to mesh, taking Judaism and enforcing that upon the Gentiles, and it doesn't work. It's kind of like taking that round peg and putting it in a square hole, or vice versa. It doesn't fit. It doesn't work because it's not meant to work. I think that is what Jesus is preparing them for here. Is he's preparing them for something new. We're not going to have all these fasts. We're not going to have all of these feasts. You're not going to have all of these sacrifices. You're not going to have all these ritual things that you're used to. What you're going to be left with is something that is perfect, something that is whole. You're going to be left with one ultimate sacrifice that has finally taken away the sins of the world. You're going to be left with, rather than a physical feast period that happens all the time, well, you're going to be left with, for us as Christians, maybe we might be able to kind of make a shadow out of a type out of the Lord's Supper. You know, that's one of the feasts that we partake of, but our feast is more spiritual, or is definitely spiritual rather than physical. And so the same thing with this fasting here is that we don't really have need of these things as far as a religious commandment goes. So Jesus is not giving us a command that, hey, we're, as Christians under the New Testament, we need to fast, and we're going to have to throw these things off and dedicate our time to this, because we have that which we would be fasting for anyway. Now, again, as we said, there's nothing wrong with doing it. It's just not something that is required of us as Christians. If we want to do it personally, great. It's a very good thing. Moderation in life and self-control and monitoring ourselves and keeping ourselves centered is a very good thing. Excess is never good for mental clarity. So, any other questions or comments on that before we carry on? All right, we still got a little bit of time left. So, first off, we've seen that, well, you're eating and drinking. You should be fasting. You should be fasting, and you should be fasting and praying like the disciples of the Pharisees and the disciples of John are, but yet now here you are, you're eating and drinking. Now you're picking grain. Now now it's on the Sabbath. So let's go over to Matthew chapter 12, 1 through 8. Matthew 12, 1 through 8.
May I read something right quick?
Yes, sir. Sure.
About just plucking and grinding. I had to think about it because we covered it in Bible study on the Old Testament.
Okay.
So I had to look it up.
Right.
The Pharisees had created issues where there was no issue.
Right.
They had taken the
Definitely.
law, they had taken it to the uttermost depths of the rabbit hole.
Mhm.
Okay? And people do that today. They'll take something, and they'll run it in the ground, they'll break it off, and then they'll take a stick and go to beating on the ground around it, okay? That's what they've done. And when I wanna read this, it may help us, maybe understand a
Sure.
little better what you think to do.
Mhm.
Turn over to Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 25. Let's see what the whole issue was here.
I'm sorry, what verse did you say that was?
Chapter 23, verse 25.
25, okay.
When thou comest into the standing corn of thy neighbor, then thou mayest pluck the ears with thine hand. But watch the thing here. That wasn't considered work until, watch this. But thou shalt not move a sickle unto thy neighbor's corner. So, Matthew chapter 12. Okay.
Now, this is this commandments here in Deuteronomy chapter 23 for the Sabbath day?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Yep. All right. Matthew chapter 12. At that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. His disciples were hungry, and they began to pluck heads of grain and to eat. When the Pharisees saw it, they said to him, "Look, your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath." He said to them, "Have you not read what David did when he was hungry, and those who were with him, how he entered the house of God and ate the bread of the presence, which was not lawful for him to eat, nor those who were with him, but only for the priest? Where have you read in the law how on the Sabbath the priest in the temple profane the Sabbath and are guiltless? I tell you, something greater than the temple is here. If you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless. For the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath." Right there, that kind of answers the question. You can't tell me what is and what isn't lawful to do on the Sabbath. I'm the one that created the Sabbath. I'm the one that gave you the Sabbath laws. You can't tell me what is and isn't lawful on the Sabbath day. So disciples, they're plucking the heads of grain, and what the Jews would do is they would kind of put them together and they would mash them and they would kind of rub it together and it would kind of heat it up and such, and then they'd eat it. So when they say, "Look, your disciples are doing what's not lawful to do on the Sabbath day," you're working. You're preparing food. Jews were supposed to have their food already prepared the night before that they were going to eat for the Sabbath day. So you can't do that. You're preparing food. Have you not read what David did when he was hungry? On the surface, it kind of looks like what Jesus is saying was, this surely is not as bad as that. Kind of what it looks like on the surface, but what he's calling them out on is, where's your condemnation of that? Where's your condemnation of profaning the temple of God, or the tabernacle of God? And then the priest in the temple every Sabbath are offering sacrifices. They're working. They're doing things that are not lawful, but yet they have to do it. Is all work unlawful? Brother Jeremy?
Also, I think parallels with it, Leviticus 23:22. Leviticus 23:22. When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not only reap the corners of your field when you reap, nor shall you gather any gleaning from your harvest. You shall leave them for the poor and for the stranger. I'm the Lord your God. So not only was it left there for people, as long as they weren't like making a chore of it. You got it to eat, you kept moving.
Right.
I think that's what this addresses.
The Jewish society was, in its core, was very much built around community. You're purposely going to leave the corners, and you're purposely, if anything falls to the ground while you're harvesting, you don't pick it back up. You leave it. And the poor would actually come along behind the harvesters and gather those things. So it was a way to provide for the poor that were around you. But it was there for the poor and for the stranger, the sojourner, some translations would read. So, Brother Bobby.
Just right quick, like read, nowhere did mercy and grace and doing good.
Right.
That was it. A lot of that was their doing. They bound the burdens upon me. You know? That
Right.
They couldn't keep themselves. They were gonna make sure that you couldn't keep them.
Right. Yeah, we've seen this before. What, Ryan, go ahead.
It seems like this is just an example of the Pharisees are really trying to grasp at straws, get them wherever they think they can, try and trip them up somehow, see what they can do, see if he'll contradict what the law of Moses actually says,
Right.
to disprove his claims about who he is. Not that they really believe it themselves, but they're just going to say whatever they can to try and discredit Christ.
Right. From what we know of them, not a single one of them most likely are going to pass through a grain field and not pluck some pieces of grain and do it themselves. These situations, yes, are a trap of Jesus. They're trying to trap him in his words and the things that he says, so that they have something to go on. Later, when they try to have a trial for him, we're going to see that several people are getting up, getting false testimonies, and nothing is sticking. Nothing's working until finally somebody steps up and says that he is claimed to be the Son of God. Oh, we have heard him say that he's going to tear down this temple. You know, finally they're able to bring up something that they can make stick and give a blasphemy charge and then try to get the Romans to have him crucified. But all this is a test.
I mean,
Yes.
He turns around and tells his disciples not to do that. First thing they're going to do is, no. The law of Moses actually says they can do this.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, they're trying to,
Right.
sneak around.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Real quick, this verse 7, we've seen this before in another place. If you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. When it comes to the law of God, and this is extremely important for us to realize. When it comes to the law of God, there are two faces, if you will, that you have to consider. The letter of the law and the spirit of the law. What is the law saying? What is the law commanding? Now, what is the context of that law? What is the spirit? What is that law trying to teach? Remember, the laws that we have as Christians and the laws that God has given are not arbitrary. They're not just a list of things that God has chosen that we can and cannot do. What they are is, if we obey those laws perfectly, we have now exemplified the picture of Christ, of God. These laws are the nature of God. And so what is this law trying to teach us? What is this law? Why is this law the way it is? Why do we have a Sabbath day? Why do we have a day of rest where it's commanded that we don't really do a lot? There's some necessary tasks that must be done on those days. And that's understood. But we don't go, we make preparation so that we can rest and focus on God outside of those necessary tasks. Yes, we're not supposed to work on the Sabbath day. But there are some things that we're going to have to do. Like Jesus says, which one of you, if your ox is falling into the ditch, will not get your ox out of the ditch? Are you going to leave him there for this entire Sabbath day and then come back the next day and hope he's alive and hope he's not injured? Or are you going to take care of your oxen? You're going to take care of your oxen. You're going to go out and you're going to feed and water your animals and make sure that they are tended. There's some necessary things that are going to be done. So there's the spirit of the law, while still obeying the letter of the law. And we cannot have more of one than the other. We cannot have one and not the other. We can't just have the spirit of the law and completely ignore the letter and the other way around. Brother Bobby?
Some of the government regulations, those that work with this stuff, that really understand what's going on with it, when the regulation is given or the law is given, what is the intent?
Exactly.
Same thing you said, even within that realm of things outside of the church, there are people that recognize, okay, you got this here, right? But what is the intent? What was the intent? What is the spirit of it? Okay? So, those people that have to take that approach to it, it's a whole lot easier to work with.
Right.
Okay, because they understand that, wait a minute, this was written, but here's the application, here's the intent. Okay? It's not just some arbitrary deal.
Right.
So anyway, but I just wanted to say that, to reaffirm what you said.
Right. And it-
Right.
Yeah, and that's exactly what Jesus says. Is if you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless.
Right.
You would not have seen and even thought that this would be an issue. To simply walk through and grab while you're walking, how much more work is it? What are we doing here? The spirit of the law versus the letter of the law. And we can go too far one way or the other. We can go too far one way or the other. I believe it was Brother Paul Torrance that said at one time that we can run past Jerusalem to get out of Babylon. You know, we have to be careful about the stances that we take and the things that we stand on and make a law on, you know. But at the same time, we have to have the letter of the law. You know, that the law is what guides us. That is what the law says. But are there, I don't want to say exceptions within the law, but I mean, do we have some leeway that we can go either way in order to accomplish the letter of the law? And that's what we need both of those things in order to perfectly fulfill the nature of God and the relationship that we have with Him. So we have to consider, and Brother Bobby said the word that I was struggling to come up with, the intent of the law. What is the intent of that? Now, do we have some leeway there that we can still get to that intent? And I'm not trying to say that the end justifies the means by any means. That's not at all what I'm saying. That we can do whatever so long as we have a good motive and we're accomplishing this. That's not at all what I'm trying to say. But we need to consider both of these things. And we also need to consider our time as well. And I'm past that time.